Here's a key insight for you. Original thought is rare and precious. The act of original thinking is difficult, highly valuable, and rare. Almost nobody is thinking from scratch. Your thinking is biased by social conditioning and your position within society. How you're surviving, how you're supporting your family, how you're feeding yourself, how you're paying your mortgage, this places limits upon your mind. Make that connection. And then sort of think backwards and kind of like reverse engineer what position you want to take in society based upon how free you want your mind to be. Like, what kind of position do I need to have in society in order to have the freedom of mind that I want to have? Think about it like that. Now, see, in order to think, your mind has to frame things in certain specific ways. I call these frames. You might also call these paradigms. Socialization programs your mind with various ready-made frames that you can use. Now, these frames can be very handy, but they can also be limited because these frames lock down your mind's full freedom and true intelligence. And to access these superhuman levels of intelligence that I'm talking about, you have to deconstruct and free your mind of these frames. These frames are like ways of seeing the world and seeing situations and thinking about situations. And these ways, it's like a box that you think inside of, that you don't really question. And this frame comes with various kinds of assumptions and expectations. It's like different grooves that your mind can go down to think down. Think of grooves on a record, and the needle goes and follows the grooves. That's kind of how your mind works with these frames. Here's a few examples of what I mean by these frames. For example, when we ask the question, like, what is spirituality? How do you conceive of and think of what spirituality is, what its importance is, what its meaning is, what it's about? You probably have some kind of frame you were given, based on which books you read or teachers you listened to or, what your priest said in church, the church you went to, or maybe the spiritual tradition that you are subscribed to. Like, let's say you're a Buddhist, right? Buddhism presents a very specific frame for spirituality. Like, you might think, well, spirituality is about meditating, or spirituality is about escaping suffering, eliminating all suffering, or spirituality is about liberation. See, just these like labels and words that you heard as part of the echo chamber of Buddhism, these got stuck in your mind to the point where your average Buddhist cannot think of spirituality outside of Buddhism. And I'm not just saying here just like that some Buddhist is just like behaving like a fundamentalist Christian. No. The average Buddhist is much more developed than a fundamentalist Christian. So that's not the problem. I mean, fundamentalism is such a stupid and limiting constraint on the mind that I'm not even talking about it here. It's so stupid. I'm talking about something more subtle and more nuanced. You can be a very intelligent academic Buddhist, for example, and you think that you're being very intelligent about your spirituality because you're not a fundamentalist. And maybe you're even open to other religions. You're not just exclusively Buddhist, but you're also open to Hinduism, you're open to yoga, you're even open to Christianity and Islam. And you might say, well, yeah, I'm kind of one of these open-minded Buddhists, that is not like dogmatically, militantly Buddhist. And therefore, Leo, this is not a problem for me. No, it's a problem for you. Buddhism presents frames of how to think about spirituality. This is a problem. because actually Buddhism prevents you, believe it or not, from accessing superhuman levels of not consciousness, but intelligence. Or, for example, what is science? You have certain frames about what the word science means, what it is, what it isn't. You got these frames from school or elsewhere. And you think about science in this very limited fashion based on the frames you were given, however you define scientific method or whatever else. You might have ideas of like who the ideal scientist is. The ideal scientist, you might say, is Albert Einstein or Isaac Newton or whoever. And then you go and you try to emulate those people in your quest to become a great scientist yourself, for example. And these frames were all implicitly programmed into your mind as you were growing up. You're not even questioning it, right? The average scientist at MIT is going about the pursuit of being a scientist in such a conformist manner that they have no access to superhuman levels of intelligence that I'm talking about as a result of this. Other examples of frames might be materialism. We've talked about that in the past a lot. Evolution is a frame, looking at everything in terms of evolution. Like this is evolving, that's evolving. Evolution is a huge frame that many scientifically minded people just adopt without really questioning it seriously. What does it mean? What is evolution? What are its limits? What are alternatives to evolution, right? See, like once you get the frame of evolution stuck in your mind, like everything to you will look like evolution. Just, as the old saying goes, when you have a hammer, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That's the problem with these frames. Or for example, simulation theory. A lot of people these days are just so conformist about, they think they're doing deep philosophy by thinking about simulation theory, but trace where you got the idea of simulation theory from. The whole idea of we're in the matrix, man. A lot of people say, oh, we're in the matrix. Let's escape the matrix. They're just parroting words. You can tell they're just parroting words they heard from elsewhere. They're not thinking deeply about what the matrix is or what simulation theory is or whether it's even true or whether it's even a good idea. They think they're being smart when they're talking about these things, but they're just parroting ideas. Computer analogies are very popular these days. Why is that? When you're thinking about the mind or the brain, you think about computers. You make computer analogies, operating systems and this and that. And I've done that in the past. So I'm not saying that's completely invalid, but a lot of people will use these analogies without really thinking about where they're getting their analogies from. They're thinking of humans in terms of computers. But is that really a valid analogy? Where did that come from? Did you even think about it? No, you're just parroting these analogies because it's part of the zeitgeist, the culture. So these are some examples of frames, and these need to be questioned and broken down in order to truly unleash your full intelligence.